Blake Toppmeyer joins us now, Gannett's SEC football columnist. Blake, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, I appreciate the time. So you and I don't know if this says something bad about you, but you and I have similar thought processes sometimes. You'll write a column that I've kind of been thinking about. And I want to talk about the quarterback column that you had. But first, I want to go back to, I thought you essentially called out, which was the right thing to do. That Georgia has a culture problem right now. They've had multiple issues of cars involved, and with groups of people that have ties to the university. I just want to get your thoughts on where Georgia's program is right now. It's not to say it can't be fixed, but for now, I'd be a little bit concerned if I'm Kirby Smart. You?
Well, I mean, he won a national championship 2 years in a row. So, if there's a discipline issue, and I think you could, and I did make the case that there was, particularly as it pertains around these repeated instances of high speed driving. It's not spilling over into performance on the field. I think that's one thing you can say. But I do think, from a larger lens, it is concerning. For reasons beyond whatever's happening on the field, for athlete safety. I mean, we saw obviously the tragic incident in January. So first and foremost, I think that's why the issue needs to be addressed. Beyond the football matters of any of this, wins and losses and the whole bit. We've seen this become an issue with Georgia. We've seen it become a repeated issue. You saw in that police body cam video during a Jalen Carter traffic stop last fall. The police officer said during that video that he quote, stopped a bunch of y'all's football players and quote, y'all need to slow down. And that message obviously didn't get through. And as I wrote, I think Kirby Smart has responsibility to make sure that message does get through.
No, I agree completely. And in another life, I covered a Tennessee football program that had off-field issues and still had success on the field. Do fans really care until it starts affecting what's happening on the field? Because I think it tends to trend that way, that if you don't have discipline off the field, at some point it hurts your discipline on the field. That's my take.
Yeah, I think fan bases are split on this. I think there's obviously a good chunk of most fan bases that sort of embody the "just win, baby" mantra, and you will even jokingly see sometimes with a lot of programs in the SEC when an athlete is arrested for some minor offense, you'll hear fans joke, "Oh, we're back," as if a sign of delinquent behavior is somehow linked to success on the field, that you're throwing standards out the window for athlete conduct. So some fans don't care, but I do think, within every fan base, there is a portion of folks who are uncomfortable with repeated behavior that runs afoul of the law. And, what the split is, I can't say. If you're winning games, no question, I think your fan base is more tolerant of certain behavior than they are when you're losing games. But I do think, kind of at all times, there's maybe a quiet portion of every fan base that hates to see stuff like this happen and would prefer their coaches, maybe not be the old school iron fisted disciplinarians, but to still have some sense of control over what's happening in their program.
Blake, dare I say, is this going too far to say that Kirby Smart is reaching Urban Meyer level of defiance, the way Urban Meyer was at Florida in the late 2000s?
Ouch.
I think that's probably a stretch at this point. Yeah, I think that's probably going too far. There doesn't seem to be, at least publicly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of action, attention, disciplinary measures taken toward this particular issue of high-speed driving within his program. I think it's fair to say that he's turned a blind eye, to repeated high-speed driving conduct within his program. I think all of that, and I think it does demand, particularly in light of what happened in January. That high speed car crash in which alcohol was involved resulted in the death of an athlete and a staff member. I mean, that has to be a wake up call. If he had his head buried in the sand before and said, kids will be kids, high speed driving comes with the territory, you can't have that anymore. You shouldn't need a wake up call like that. But now that that's happened, I think going forward, you have to take this seriously.
Like, I think the scary thing to me is the trend is the players and the coaches just rule the media as far as accessibility and that sort of thing. And nowadays you can say, let's say Tennessee after the South Carolina game, you say, I'm not going to get into the Jeremy Banks situation. Nico recently was asked a question, does the NIL put more pressure on him? He goes, next question, like he was Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. And there just seems to be, and I get that with football to some extent, but there seems to be nowadays this standoffishness, even more than I was your guys' age, that says I can just tell you to step off and I don't have to answer your questions. And that to me is scary when you don't have to answer to the media when serious issues like this are going on. Kirby Smart should have to say something a little more concrete. Sorry, I rambled on a little bit there.
Well, yeah, and I think it's on the media to hold power to account for sure. I would agree with you that over time, a lot of columnists have lost their punch for whatever reason. I think access could be part of it. I think some of it is just sort of the way of the industry. We have fewer voices, at our papers of record anymore than we used to. And I think sometimes we wind up with storytellers in those columnist positions what you really need is opinion voices in those columnist positions. If you're a columnist and you don't have opinions, I would argue you're not doing your job. Now, some people don't see it that way, and I think that's kind of the evolution of the position. But yeah, I think you're right that some of it does trace back to the shrinking access and the threat of peeling back that even further if you dare hold someone to account or take a heavy hand on someone. The way I look at that is, I don't know, do we still count column inches anymore? Seems like anymore it's more on word counts, but let's say I got 20 column inches 4 days a week and 7 times a week during the season. You can give me access or you can not give me access, but I still have those column inches to fill one way or the other, and I still have opinions to air.
Blake, how much of Georgia's, I guess, lack of discipline how much of this is an administrative reaction to the Mark Richt years, where they spent 15 years with Mark Richt, believing they could win a national title with integrity, and they had more integrity than any program in the SEC during that time, bar none, and it didn't work out. So how much of this was the administration just throwing their hands up and being like, you know what, forget it. We're just going to not care at all anymore because we're tired of not winning national titles?
I think a lot of schools have that mentality. I don't think this is a Georgia situation in particular. The high-speed driving seems to be rooted at Georgia, but I think this evolution it really is rampant across the SEC. I mean, we just saw Ole Miss basketball hire Chris Beard 1 month after a felony arrest charge that he was facing was dropped, and just 2 months after he was fired for cause, and his previous employer labeled him, quote, unfit to lead. We saw Nick Saban during the football season. The severity of the incidents are not necessarily comparable, but we saw Nick Saban with the Jermaine Burton incident and the Tennessee fans rushing the field, and Jermaine Burton caught on video making contact with a female student in the head. And Nick Saban tried to gaslight us all into believing that Jermaine Burton, who had his helmet in hand and was casually walking off the field, was in some way scared of this joyful reveler, this petite college co-ed and that's why he bopped her in the head. I mean, that's ludicrous. You know, I mean, Josh Heupel, you know, Tennessee, Josh Heupel, Jalen McCullough was arrested and sat out one game before he stepped back on the field for, you know, allegations of a serious incident last fall. So I think this is, frankly, guys, I think this is happening throughout the SEC. I do think there's a culture now throughout college sports, college football in particular, that win at all costs. And, you know, in many cases, I do think athlete discipline has been peeled back. And part of that could be athletes have so much more power and control now than they used to. They don't like the way the program is being run. They can hop in the portal pretty quickly and be gone. And you know, that combined with the pressure that coaches faces to win or be fired, I think maybe has some coaches running their programs in a way that if you gave them truth serum, they wouldn't actually like to run it that way.